Hello and welcome! Silrace here with The Division. This is going to be a kind of a brief video where I simply announce the end of the Division content for my channel, and also I want to talk a little bit about the Division and why I actually decided not to make any more content of the game for my YouTube channel here. So I came to the Division rather late in its lifespan. I mean, it's a game which came on both consoles and the PC, and as such we all always knew that it wouldn't last, because there will be a new console and then you either port the game over to the new console, which almost never happens, or you build a new one for the new console, as in Division 2 or whatever they decide to call it, but essentially a sequel. And that is very much what will happen. So, always knew that eventually the Division would die out entirely. Still, I came into it kinda late because when it released I kept hearing and seeing a whole lot of bugs and glitches and other problems with the game, so I skipped it and brought it when, well, there was a sale, and I figured out at that point, okay, let's do a little bit of research, figured out most of the bugs and problems had been fixed, so I grabbed the game on the sale and have enjoyed it quite a bit. The leveling, the actual story is fairly gripping, it's fairly well done. In the PvE context, I'm quite enjoying the Division, it's quite fun. Some of the issues come with the kind of utter lack of content, or how repetitive the content becomes, like you do the same thing over and over in hopes to getting better gear, and there is very little variation. Like, I love the survival DLC from the point of view that it at least added a little bit of variety to the, you know, way you play. Of course, they didn't do things like randomize all the loot spawns and whatever, but that would have added even more variety. But in the end, I quite like that. Also, another issue I have right now is with how the different DLC aspects of the game, how they the reward structure for them is out of whack. Like, you get so much better rewards for playing the newer DLC than you get for playing the older DLC. That is just silly. Like, all of these things should have about the same reward system for the time spent. Whether it's underground, or survival, or last stand. Another thing I personally think hurt the game quite a lot was how the PvP was set up. Like, the Dark Zone is a fine idea. World PvP in games like World of Warcraft and so on, it attracts certain kind of crowd. However, even games like World of Warcraft have figured out years and years ago that you also need a separate aspect for the folks who don't want to do that PvP, but they want to just, you know, do more of a, let's say, casual kind of battleground style PvP. And if Last Stand had been, or something similar to it, had it been in the Division from the beginning, that would have been you know, something to hold people in for a longer time, at least to my mind anyway. So, unfortunately, Last Stand DLC comes quite late into the game's lifespan, so forth. There are a number of issues which I get overly baffled by, like, how does this shit exist? For example, you have actually a colorblind mode in the game, however it only affects the inventory screen. It doesn't change enemy health bars in the overworld itself, which is beyond ridiculous. Like, if you put in a colorblind mode, then it should have effect in the world itself, not just your inventory screen. If you change keybinds, those changed keybinds don't actually affect the menu. When you go into your inventory menu, those keys are still the default keys always. You can't rebind those unless you use some kind of third-party software to do that. So these kind of little things which make no sense to me, which should have been fixed, you know, way back when, you know, pointed out that I changed all my menu keys, essentially, like, I changed all my keys, but they don't actually do anything in this menu. So please fix, and also colorblind modes, things like this. are really annoying, at least to me personally. Like, it just shows, to me it shows the incompetence of the developer or the people behind making the game. They don't care for it enough to fix these things, because there are going to be people who won't be able to play the game for various reasons over issues like this. Colorblind mode being one of the big ones. Because, well, red and green colorblind is kind of common if you start looking it up. It is kind of common in the world. Anyway, but that is all little things. Overall, PvP is where the Division failed for me. Not necessarily the fact that the Dark Zone or the Last Stand came in so late and we only had Dark Zone and whatnot. That's not the thing. For me, the failing point is that the PvP combat is not at all how you fight PvE combat. You essentially do two different types of combat in the game, but also because the PvP combat is not actually any way, shape or form a combat between two humans. And in this game we are not playing superheroes or some kind of an android or anything of the sort. We are supposed to be humans, we are supposed to be agents. And granted, that gives some, you know, semblance of skill and so on to be an agent. However, we're still supposed to be humans. And when PvP combat is more akin to the fight between attack helicopters than humans, I see something horribly wrong with it there. And what do I mean by attack helicopter combat? Well, if you don't know how attack helicopter strafing runs and whatnot work, basically these things are equipped with, well, rotary machine guns, with the idea of being, because your engagement time with a target tends to be anywhere from a second to about 3 or 4 seconds. The point is to try to get as much lead into a target as possible within that engagement window. And that's essentially what the Division PvP combat is about. You burst out all of your rounds as fast as possible into a target, then you maneuver like a lunatic while you're reloading, and then you redo that. Basically you have 3 to 4 second engagements, and then both of you are reloading, kind of. And that's what keeps happening. I don't think it is very skillful, in all honesty, and I don't honestly find it fun or any sort of you know, how would I put this? Let's just say that it takes me out of the game as a whole so very much, because when I'm fighting a proper tougher enemy when it comes to NPCs, I'm doing that from fighting cover, actually taking shots, possibly moving between covers and so on. Whereas for the PvP combat, none of that applies. It's just a random grenade toss, run around in circles, and somebody comes out on top. And that's all there is to it. To me, there is a massive disconnect. And if they do the Division 2, I hope they learn from that disconnect and actually, you know, make those two combat systems kind of similar. There is that. Anyway, thank you very much for listening and watching and so on. End of the Division content for the channel for me. It is still a good game if you really want to try out yourself a new looter shooter, or rather at this point an old, but possibly a new one for you. And still I can recommend it for that aspect, but personally I may still play it from time to time, but I'm not going to do any more videos on it. As said, thank you very much for watching.